Thank each and every one of you for taking time out of your busy schedules to gain more insight into AC Transit Realign and the Board of Directors-led draft plan. Shortly, our CEO and General Manager will discuss how the pandemic has affected AC Transit and outline how the Realign plan will adjust and optimize our bus network while reinforcing its future viability. We will first begin with instructions for our Spanish-speaking participants, followed by those for our Chinese Mandarin and Cantonese-speaking participants.
Buenas tardes a todos. Les invitamos a seleccionar el español si está limitado en su dominio de inglés. De esta manera puede escuchar a los y las intérpretes de inglés al español. Si está en su computadora, hay un globo terráqueo en la parte inferior de su pantalla que dice Interpretación, donde podrá seleccionar español. Selecciónelo al poner un clic o una palomita. Si está usando su celular o tableta, ubique y toque los tres puntitos ligeramente y ponga una palomita en español y seleccione Done o Finalizar. Este último paso es muy importante para activar los servicios de interpretación, los cuales pueden disfrutar de una manera simultánea. Muchas gracias. Estamos a sus órdenes. Thank you, Mr. Lyles. Back to you.
We will now follow with Chinese Mandarin.
欢迎您参加今晚的 AC Transit Realign 公车路线调整计划社区研讨会。我们先来讲解一下今晚会议的一些会议事宜。如果你需要使用显示屏幕的功能，请点击屏幕工具栏中的 CC 图标显示字幕。如果你需要国语同步翻译，请点击屏幕工具栏中的地球仪标记，然后选择国语。谢谢。Back to you.
Thank you. And finally, our Cantonese-speaking participants.
今晚晚上好，我哋今日咧呢一度係 AC Transit 呢一個嘅媒體事務部嚟到咧，好高興今日咧嚟到係有一個嘅會議。首先我哋透過呢個點擊嘅 Zoom 嘅熒幕嘅嗰個嘅橫幅鐘標嚟到係有一個嘅顯示字幕，有一個嘅 CC 嘅圖標可以使用呢一個嘅隱藏式嘅字幕。請你點擊嗰個嘅縮放熒幕橫幅中嗰度解釋地球圖標，然後從呢一度咧嚟到咧係選擇英語。如果你係沒有嚟到係啟動地球嘅解釋嘅話嘅，咁樣咧，首先請你允許我哋咧係有西班牙語、普通話同埋粵語嚟到提供說明。
Thank you so much and stick around. Let's take a moment to go over some housekeeping matters for tonight's workshop. First, closed captioning is available by clicking the CC icon in the Zoom screen banner labeled Show Captions. Please click the interpretation globe icon in the Zoom screen banner and select English from the menu. We have not activated the interpretation globe just yet. First, allow us a moment to provide instructions once again in Spanish, Mandarin, and Cantonese. Let's advance to slide 3, and I now invite our interpreters for those participating via Zoom, and we will begin with Spanish.
Sí, en este momento también les vamos a proporcionar las instrucciones en caso de que ustedes quieran seguir en este momento los subtítulos, también lo pueden hacer. Está disponible si ustedes hacen un chasqueo, un clic, donde tiene el icono CC. Aquí en esta pantalla inferior está indicado de esta manera. Entonces también hacen un clic en el globo terráqueo de interpretación y ustedes pueden ver entonces la selección de inglés en el menú. También lo pueden ustedes activar en su idioma deseado. Gracias. Thank you. Back to you.
Thank you. Mandarin, please.
大家好，如果你需要使用显示屏幕的功能，请点击 Zoom 屏幕上工具栏中的 CC 图标显示字幕。如果你需要国语翻译的话，请点击屏幕栏中的地图图标，选择国語。謝謝。Back to you.
Thank you. And finally, Cantonese, please.
對於你哋所選擇嘅語言隱藏式嘅字幕，請你單擊嗰個嘅橫幅中嘅 CC 圖標， 如你需要選擇你嘅語言進行呢一個嘅口譯，請你單擊呢一個嘅口譯嘅圖標，並嚟到咧響呢一個嘅熒幕嗰度選擇你嘅語言。唔該，Go ahead.
Thank you. We are now enabling interpretation. So let's give everyone a moment to join their respective language channels. Please follow the earlier instructions I just provided to join your language channel. We will pause for a few moments so that everyone may be connected. Full participation with all our neighbors is incredibly vital, and we thank you for your patience during the setup process. I will now explain how to ask questions during this workshop. If you are participating via Zoom, the raised hand feature will not be used. You may, however, type your questions using the Q&A tool at any time. Those accessing Zoom on a computer or smartphone should also use the Q&A feature to submit your questions. We'll have that translation in Spanish, please. Claudia, if you're able to hear us. She may have some tech.
They already are in translation. So once somebody already clicked on that. So
Got it. Okay, so with the rules established, I would now like to introduce AC Transit's CEO and General Manager, Michael Hirsch. Mr. Hirsch was appointed to his position nearly a decade ago and brings a wealth of transit experience, including expertise in bus and light rail operations, operator training, accessible services, planning, scheduling, and facilities maintenance. Please welcome Michael Hirsch.
Well, thanks, Robert. Thanks for that warm introduction. I didn't expect that. And thank you, everyone, for attending tonight's meeting. We sincerely appreciate your cooperation with the housekeeping rules. Equity forms the foundation of the Realign Plan, and this extends to ensuring widespread access to information in multiple languages, closed captioning. We're trying to get this presentation out in as many forms, accessible forms as we can. Tonight, we'll walk you through what we call the Realign Plan. In short, it's an all-encompassing initiative to right-size our bus network. After a year's work of public outreach and meetings, just like this workshop, we've developed a draft plan, which is a proposal to add new bus lines, consolidate certain lines, and potentially eliminate others. A significant portion of time has been allocated at the conclusion of this workshop tonight to hear your questions and comments. We take these questions and comments very, very seriously. We'll make every effort to address them with responses from our subject matter expert panelists here tonight. Let's start with an overview of our nearly 65-year-old transit district. Fun fact, although many believe AC Transit represents Alameda County Transit, we're actually the Alameda Contra Costa Transit District. We got our start in 1960 and today proudly claim the title of California's largest bus-only public transit system. For the real transit geeks out there, we actually come from the ashes, or the what was the key system. For the transit geeks, trains used to run over the Bay Bridge, and Alameda County assumed the resources and assets when the key system went under. We plan to continue to serve the East Bay for at least another century. But admittedly, March 2020 and the years that have followed the pandemic have been an operations challenge. In fact, I've been doing this since 1993, and what's happening in transit now is absolutely unprecedented. AC Transit continues to experience a dramatic impact to our ridership. Except without our transit-dependent riders or those with no access to a car, this demographic is more than riders. They're essential workers of the East Bay who strongly returned to our bus lines and represent 43% of our daily ridership. Another equally large demographic are low-income riders who represent 65% of our ridership. So why change our bus network? You may be asking, if riders have returned, then why change the bus network? Similar to public transportation agencies throughout the country, we saw record drops in ridership, and traditional commuter patterns continue to be altered. A leading factor is remote and hybrid work schedules. Although remote work has decreased, a February 2024 survey found that 44% of employees prefer a hybrid working model, and we are certainly seeing that certain days of the week. AC Transit is besting the ridership trends. We've grown to 74% of our 2019 pre-pandemic numbers and showing a positive upward trajectory every month. But ridership successes are tempered by our resource constraints. Our constraints are funding and person power. AC Transit continues to face challenges with recruiting and retaining bus operators. The drop in ridership has a direct link to losses at the fare box. What's more, with fewer workers commuting to job centers, the demand for goods and services in those areas has decreased significantly. This decline translates into a drop in tax revenues impacting our funding, and yet we still face the same inflation pressures that you all do. We pay more for buses, we pay more for fuel. The expenses to run transit agency are sometimes overwhelming. As a result of this uncertainty about our economy and recovery, I tasked our team in early 2023 with developing a plan that could navigate our bus network challenges. That plan is Realign, and it has received significant public feedback over the past year, and it is evident that Realign is resonating with riders and our East Bay communities. This positive response is bolstering my confidence in its future success. We do, however, have a forecasted fiscal cliff. Now, I want to be clear, our finances are better than some of the transit agencies out there, but every transit agency in the Bay Area and most of the United States are facing very, very choppy financial waters ahead. We've stretched the dollars we received from federal aid during the pandemic, and we continue to tighten our belt fiscally, along with pursuing other opportunities to manage our forecasted budget shortfall. This fiscal cliff is not unique to us, but it's something that all transit agencies are having to navigate. This is the reality that we find ourselves in today. In this chart, it assumes that we continue to operate at 85% of the 2019 service levels. In fiscal year 2026, you can see the first budget impact where we expect to see an $11 million shortfall. That's something we can manage through, but that continues to grow to an expected budget shortfall of $116 million by fiscal year 2029. We're trying to address this fiscal cliff, and you may have heard or read in the news that Bay Area agencies are working together to explore and pursue funds to substantially sustain our bus operations. The range of funding sources would require things like increases in fare revenues, regional, state, and federal subsidies, or we could be forced to make the difficult decision to cut service. We need your help. We have 2 years to figure it out and make it sustainable. Please let your elected officials know that we need funding to maintain AC Transit's bus network. At the same time, we don't have enough operators. We're hiring. Despite the hiring challenges of intense competition for talent, the high cost of living, and the complexity of affordable housing leading to super commutes in the Bay Area, AC Transit continues to make advances in recruiting and hiring. Total hiring increased over 22% from 171 hires in 2022 to 209 hires in 2023. Through April of this year, there are 32 total new hires, with more than 35 in training now. We still have a substantial hill to climb when it comes to hiring and recruiting frontline employees, largely because of our region's competitive job market, means the district faces offering increasingly attractive and higher compensation packages to attract and retain talent. All this, as we approach a fiscal cliff, offering higher compensation packages becomes more and more challenging. With that, please go to actransit.org/careers. We have a hiring bonus. We have very proud union-operated transit with living wage jobs, and we would love to have you come work for us. So what is Realign? The Realign Plan is a comprehensive review and update of every bus line in our network and how we deliver our service. Realign is cost neutral, which means there's no net cost or financial impact. We're examining our bus lines, their origins, their destinations, the frequency of buses on each line, and the specific times and days they operate. Our in-transit planners, along with a team of expert consultants, have been assigned to conduct this comprehensive analysis. It's crucial to clarify that Realign prioritizes our service. To maintain this focus, Realign does not include bus shelters, fares, the upkeep of digital information for riders. We have listened to our riders and community members who have emphasized the significance of these customer experiences, and you can be assured they will be addressed as separate initiatives. There are guiding principles with Realign. Last year, our board of directors approved 3 community-driven guiding principles. They are equity, reliability, and frequency. Simply put, equity, prioritizing bus lines for our neediest communities. These are often called equity priority communities, or groups that are disproportionately affected by poverty, discrimination, lack of access to resources, or other forms of disadvantage. Reliability, predictability, and consistent schedules that minimize delays and cancellations. In other words, adjust the schedule and routes to help ensure that the bus shows up when it's supposed to show up. Finally, frequency. Design a best bus network that is efficient and reduces your wait time. The next slide, we talk about demand patterns. They've changed since 2020. Ridership demand for traditional 9 to 5 commuter service to job centers in downtown Oakland and in particular San Francisco have decreased significantly in San Francisco. And people are using the system more outside of traditional commute times at all times of the day and days of the week for a variety of trips to grocery stores, restaurants, and for social activities and recreation. The AC Transit Board of Directors has been very closely involved with this process. In January, my team brought forward a plan to the board. During that review, the board directed staff to pause the process to refine the plan and initiate additional rounds of public outreach, such as what we're doing here tonight. This included an extension of the Realign process by 6 months. The board directed focus on increasing the frequency in the core of our bus network, where low income, seniors, people with disabilities, and youth, people with limited English proficiency, and more reside. The board also gave instructions to create an updated draft plan that boosts equity and to provide reports on reliability elements and provide an update on the timeline for implementation of new service in 2025. As noted, the Realign plan has undergone extensive development, incorporating feedback from stakeholders in the community over the past year. Now, I invite and welcome our transit planning manager, Michael Eshelman, to provide a deeper insight into the draft plan. Thank you so much for attending tonight. Michael, take it away.
Mike, we can't hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you, General Manager Hirsch. Let me share what's in the draft plan. Let's start with a bit of background. In March, staff provided the AC Transit Board a set of recommended strategies, which are adopted and include 3 key components. First is broadening the frequent network. So in this case, we're adding back some frequent lines into our proposals that serve equity priority communities. Frequent lines with 15 minutes or better service on weekdays include lines 1T, 6, 10, 18, 20, 21, 51, 52, 57, 97, and NL. The second is improving reliability in a customer-focused, operator-supportive way, focusing extra buffer time in bus schedules where we're doing the worst in terms of reliability. We're focusing on those lines with on-time performance that falls below 70%. Finally, it's fine-tuning frequency for efficiency, which includes tweaking schedules here and there. For example, running buses every 15 to 17 minutes instead of every 15 minutes. In terms of broadening the frequent network, in this plan, we propose to broaden the network with 32% of our service area with access to 15 minutes or better service. If we add a few more lines back to run every 15 minutes, we can ensure that nearly a third of residents in our service area can access high quality 15-minute service as compared to just over a fifth of the service area residents under the January 2024 plan. The changes proposed in the draft plan translate into bringing another 166,000 people within range of our frequent network, 48,000 of which are people of color and 38,000 people who have a household income less than 200% of the federal poverty level. The draft plan proposes to ensure 15-minute service on the following lines: 1T, 6, 10, 18, the combined 2021, the 40, 51, 52, 54, 57, 72, and 72M, 73, 97, and NL. We're proposing to revise lines 6 and 51 to reduce the number of transfers for many people. We're keeping 3 lines on the San Pablo corridor in response to feedback that we heard last fall, with limited rapid service retained in favor of maintaining frequent transit access along the San Pablo corridor for more individuals. We're also prioritizing reliability, but with trade-offs. We're reducing service schedules on some lines, such as the 54 and 73, who will see frequency reductions from 15 minutes to 20 minutes. We'll reinvest those resources into improving reliability on other lines based on need that will reflect the feedback that we've heard. We'll share more about this once we go through the proposals in the draft plan by service area. So proposed changes in West Contra Costa County include improved frequency to 30 minutes or better and improved reliability throughout most of Richmond, San Pablo, El Cerrito, and unincorporated areas, such as North Richmond, East Richmond Heights, El Sobrante, and Kensington. Current lines 70, 72, 72R, 74, and 76 are proposed to be adjusted. Several lines would have improved coverage and/or hours of operations, including lines 72M and 70. Line 71 would remain unchanged, while line 376 is proposed for elimination due to low ridership, and its resources would be reallocated to other parts of the bus network. The frequency of line 72R service would be adjusted to every 30 minutes from the current 12 minutes, allowing for the reallocation of resources to other areas of the bus network. Line 70 is proposed to be extended from Richmond BART along Cutting Boulevard to Del Norte BART. Together with the inclusion of line 76 on Cutting Boulevard, the 2 bus lines would arrive every 15 minutes. Line 72 would be shortened to end Contra Costa College, with an extended line 76 covering the Rollingwood neighborhood in San Pablo using a new alignment. Line 74 would end at Olinda and Valley View Roads to provide faster trips to and from De Anza Senior High School in Richmond. In northern Alameda County, the cities of Alameda, Berkeley, Emeryville, and Oakland, the Realign Draft Plan proposes to maintain or improve frequency on key corridors, reduce the need for transfers, introduce service to new destinations, and improve overall connectivity. AC Transit would serve new areas, including Brooklyn Basin with line 96, Alcatraz Avenue with line 29, and Stanford Avenue with line 7. It would also improve service in Western Alameda with line 20, and offer new service on Piedmont Avenue and the Broadway corridor with a new direct link between Alameda and Kaiser Oakland on line 19. Lines 12 and 52 would have frequency restored to pre-pandemic service levels. The proposal calls for a weekday frequency reduction of lines 14 and 62, but the weekend frequency would be improved to better match post-pandemic travel demand. Another proposal would combine lines to eliminate transfers and provide frequent service along lines 6, 18, 51, and 88. These are lines that have pretty high ridership. Due to low ridership, the Realign Draft Plan eliminates lines suspended during the pandemic. Bus lines 46, 47, 80, 314, 339, and 356. Transforming suspensions into eliminations frees up bus and operator resources that can be reallocated to other demands within our bus network. Areas currently served by these lines would have nearby alternatives. Additionally, some segments previously served by suspended lines would have new or modified service, including line 46L serving East Oakland's 82nd Avenue and new line 27 along Berkeley's Ashby Avenue. Proposed changes in Central County are intended to create a balanced distribution of coverage and frequency across that part of the county. Central Alameda County service area includes the cities of San Leandro, Hayward, and unincorporated communities of Alameda County. Ashland, Castro Valley, Cherryland, Fairview, and San Lorenzo. Most lines retain existing alignments to ensure key destinations continue to be served, and a few lines would be adjusted to improve coverage and provide new connections. The draft plan proposes to eliminate line 99 and partially replace the service with extended line 10 south to Union City BART along Mission Boulevard corridor, reducing the need for transfers. The service schedule is improved from every 60 minutes to every 40 minutes on more lines in Central County, with route structures staying the same, except for some minor changes, such as on line 28 to serve the Boys and Girls Club in San Leandro. Line 60 remains as is and is proposed to have a small reduction in frequency from every 40 minutes to every 45 minutes. Additionally, line 86 is proposed to be extended into the Hayward Business Park to cover areas previously served by line 83. Proposed changes in southern Alameda County, which includes the cities of Fremont and Newark, aim to change to enhance the coverage and reliability of service. Lines 212, 216, 217, 232, and 239 are proposed for adjustments. Lines 200, 210, 216, 232, 239, and 251 would have improved coverage and/or hours of operation. Lines 99 and 215 would be eliminated. Line 99 is proposed to be replaced with line 10, as we mentioned before, as well as line 299 that would replace the service between Union City BART and Fremont BART via Dakota Road and Fremont Boulevard. Along with line 210, the 299, along with both lines 210 and 299 running on Fremont Boulevard, a bus would arrive every 15 minutes between Dakota Road and Walnut Avenue in Fremont. Line 217 would be shortened to operate between Fremont BART Station, California School for the Blind, Ohlone College Fremont, and Warm Springs BART Station. Line 212 would be shortened to operate between New Park Mall in Newark and Union City BART, and the portion between Union City BART and Fremont BART would be covered by line 216. Line 239 would connect Pacific Commons with both Fremont and Warm Springs BART stations. Line 215 is proposed for elimination due to low ridership, and lines 212 and 217 are proposed as partial replacements. Line 200 would be extended further west into Newark, and frequency would be reduced to 30 minutes. Improved to 30 minutes, sorry. Line 212 would no longer serve Pacific Commons, but would be extended to provide service into Santa Clara County. Would be reduced, sorry, line 200 would be reduced every 30 minutes. We're also exploring options to provide service in communities with low ridership demand who need reliable and affordable transit options. So proposed changes to Transbay and all-nighter service focus on supporting our current service. Transbay lines B, C, CB, H, M, NX1, NX2, NX4, NXC, S, SB, and Z were temporarily suspended in March 2020 due to historically low ridership. They're proposed for elimination in 2025. Previous riders of these lines would generally have alternative service options such as other Transbay and local lines connecting to BART stations. Existing lines L and LA and W and OX are proposed for consolidation into lines DBL and DBW. These changes aim to better match service levels with current ridership and allow bus and operator resources to be reinvested in our neediest communities. To support the Richmond Parkway Transit Center's Park and Ride, which connects to line LA, the proposed consolidated line L proposes to eliminate service to San Pablo's Princeton Plaza Shopping Center. Proposed line W would eliminate line W service along Fernside Boulevard and High Street in Alameda, continuing to Bay Farm Island to serve line OX stops. All-nighter service proposed changes would include a frequency reduction of line 801 to every 60 minutes to match rider levels and reallocate resources to lines serving San Leandro and other southern destinations. In addition, line 805 proposes to adjust its routing east of Coliseum BART to mirror the alignment with line 73. And now I can pass it over to Diane Castleberry, my partner on this project.
Thank you, Mike. So the next two slides will talk about public engagement and the next steps for Realign. So we started outreach on Realign more than a year ago, gathering feedback from writers and the community. The current outreach period concludes on June 5th this year. Our outreach and promotional activities include ads on and inside buses, route profile books at libraries, city council announcements, along with outreach at bus stops and community events, along with hosted events working with our community partners, and a meeting with our Lived Experience Advisory Group. Throughout our entire service area, we will have conducted more than 100 outreach activities. Additionally, we continue to use our digital communications channel, which include the project webpage, e-news, and social media. At actransit.org/realign, we will provide access to the draft plan, interactive maps that includes a trip plan feature where you can run test trips via the interactive tool and Zoom links to the Realign workshops where you can find us in the community. We encourage you to visit the project website or find us in the community to tell us what you think of the draft plan. We are currently in public review and comment on the draft plan through June 5th. Please use tonight as an opportunity to ask your questions about your bus lines in this proposal and let us know what you think. If you wish to register your comment online, go to actransit.org/realign. The comment form will ask for your zip code and the bus lines you are commenting on, and you will be able to comment on more than one. Following this review and public comment period, staff will refine the plan, and then we will move to the August 7th board meeting to set the public hearing schedule and introduce the draft final plan for public review. This will open the public comment period. We will hold 4 public hearings in September on September 9th, 10th, and 11th. The public hearing and comment period will conclude on September 11th. Staff will make final refinements and will introduce the final service plan on October 9th, 2024 for board decision. Following board decision, the service plan implementation team representing various departments within the AC Transit District will begin preparations to ready the service for implementation. We are working towards implementation that is scheduled for as early as March 2025. Now back to Robert.
Apologies for that. It's a little slow. I'd like to thank Diane, Michael Eshelman, and Michael Hirsch for your collective presentations. We'll now shift into a Q&A session, starting with some questions that we have received through the Q&A channel here. For those participating online, once again, click Q&A on the screen banner. This tool may be under the More or Participants function of the banner. Simply type in your questions or comment via the Q&A tool. For English-speaking participants who have called into this meeting, dial *9 to raise your hand. The host will unmute you to ask your question when it is your turn. For non-English speaking participants on Zoom, type your questions in language to the Q&A or into the Q&A. The interpretation team will then translate it into English to be read aloud for the project team. I'd also like to now introduce our subject matter experts, our panelists, who will help address many of the questions that you may have. First is Chris Andrzejczyk, our Chief Financial Officer, Claudia Burgos, our Director of Legislative Affairs and Community Relations, Robert Del Rosario, the Director of Planning and Development, Michael Eshelman, who you've already met, Manager of Service Planning and Realign Acting Project Manager, Diane Castleberry, who you've also just met, External Affairs Representative and Realign Deputy Project Manager, that is, and Lawrence Lewis, who is Kittleson and Associates Senior Principal Planner and Realign Project Manager. So let's move over to some of the questions that we have received, and we'll start with our first. Just give me 1 second. This first question will be designated to Michael Eshelman. The question is, bus line number 19, with Realign number 19 bus will go from low ridership to high ridership. A 60-minute frequency is too long a wait. This bus should pick up every 15 minutes or every 20 minutes. Do you agree?
I don't disagree that there should be higher ridership or higher frequency on nearly every line. And we actually, one thing we didn't mention as part of this or didn't go into a lot of details, that we have a unconstrained vision plan that's actually on a timeline to be completed this fall or early next year. And with that plan, the goal is to really explore what the future of transit, our transit network looks like, and what the future of mobility looks like in our service area. And one of the key goals that one of the key things we want to do with that plan is, in this plan, we talked about a network that's 15 minutes or better and how many people can access. And I think with a visionary plan, we want to talk about lines that are every 10 minutes or better and how many can we get there. And I think the 19 in particular, I think we can definitely propose higher frequencies on that line in that area. And I think a lot of people will use it.
Thanks, Mike. Next question will go to Robert Del Rosario. The question is, AC Transit's budget provides for 1,380 bus operator positions. How many operators do you have today?
Thanks, Robert. That's a great question. We have just shy of 1,200. It fluctuates a little bit, just depending on attrition and hirees, but we have just below 1,200 operators today.
Thank you, Mike. Let's go back to Michael Eshelman. The question is, why has the wait time for the number 7 bus that serves Richmond to Emeryville along the Arlington corridor, an area that already lost apparently permanently the H bus into San Francisco that serves the elderly and those without cars, and many students doubled from 30 to 60 minutes? I use the number 7 and number 18 buses, and the number 18 has at least as many nearly empty buses in my experience.
I think that's a great question. So any cost neutral plan, I think we kind of need to reinforce that we're not able to add new operators into this plan. So when we're talking about expanding the frequent network or adding lines or serving new places or responding to a lot of the public feedback that we've heard, there's going to be trade-offs throughout this plan. And I guess I should really note that this plan isn't set yet. This is a draft plan. This is something that we're gathering feedback on. What we're looking at doing with line 7 is taking the frequency down to better match the number of riders along that Arlington corridor. Right now, line 7 has a lot of riders along its Ashby segment, and we're proposing to attach that Ashby segment to a different line, the 27. We do see we are hearing about our proposed changes to line 7. We're also trying to extend it on Stanford down to Emeryville. And if that's successful, then that's something we can look at if we have additional resources improving the frequency on in the future.
Thanks, Mike. And I want to keep you right there for this next question. The question is, I am an Alameda Unified School District Board trustee. I am attending tonight because I am very concerned about the ending of a large portion of 21 line in Alameda. This key line transports our middle and high school students. With the cut in this line, some students have to walk almost a mile to the closest bus stop to school. Would staff be willing to come to a special meeting with the Alameda School District to collaborate on how to support these students and for further assistance for this zone schools?
I think yes. So one of the key things here is that the Realign plan is making a change to the 21. If there is any supplementary service that's already there providing mobility for those students, then it will not be affected. And this is also, as I mentioned with the line 7 comment, these are things that we want to hear. Are there things that we're missing? Are there changes that are going to have impacts we didn't foresee? And how can we get an idea of how to mitigate those impacts in the next version of the plan?
Thank you, Mike. Robert Del Rosario, if I can have you address this question. Can you also provide bonuses like education for bus operators and possible growth in the job? Alameda County has excellent community colleges.
We do a lot for recruiting operators and giving operators opportunity. First, there is a sign-on bonus for operators, and you can get that information on our website. But yes, there is growth as an employee and operator for AC Transit. We do provide tuition reimbursements and other great benefits. So that possibility for growth is definitely there.
Thank you. Michael Schulman, back to you. Will the new line 6 go from Alameda to Kaiser Oakland?
The new line 51 will go up Broadway to Kaiser Oakland. So the direct connection between Alameda and Kaiser Oakland will be on line 19 instead of the current line 51A. So line 6, however, will go up Telegraph. It will serve, I believe there's a couple hospitals along Telegraph. I think there's a Sutter hospital. So there are other opportunities. There are healthcare options for other folks if they're not in Kaiser. We are doing a few things. I mentioned line 19 to facilitate that movement between Alameda and Kaiser Oakland. And then also the line 51 and the line 6, what we can do is schedule them so that the 6 comes first up Broadway between 8th and 20th, and the 51 will immediately follow it. so that all you have to do is get off the 6 and onto the 51, make a very easy transfer, and that'll take you all the way up to Kaiser Oakland as you do today.
And as you might imagine, there's still several questions for your department. So Mike, this would probably be best addressed by you. The question is, will Transbay commute routes, lettered routes, ever be supplemented with local routes feeding to BART instead of Salesforce?
Yes, that's actually one of the key goals of our plan. So if we look back actually to before the pandemic, BART was over capacity. They were having trouble fitting everyone in the trains. And so we actually initiated conversations then to see how we could have more Transbay service going into San Francisco to alleviate those loads. But now with BART ridership a little bit lower than it was before, and space and capacity on those trains, what we've seen is there's a good opportunity to have us provide reliable, consistent local service that connects to one or more BART stations. I'm pretty sure nearly every line in our system, but maybe one, connects to a BART station. And that is a critical element. And with our focus on reliability and improving frequency on the network, I think it'll make it much easier for folks to get to BART and then along the Market Street corridor instead of the Salesforce Transit Center.
Thanks, Mike. Robert, let's pitch this question to you. For residents of Bay Farm Island and Alameda, the 21 bus connection serves as a key connection to Oakland Airport and to the BART connection there. Under the Realign plan, it would take Bay Farm residents over an hour to get to the airport. How does this change advance AC Transit's equity goals as stated on the 21 line brochure? Also, how do you justify eliminating one of only 2 lines serving the airport? That seems to undermine climate goals that support service to transit hubs like airports and BART stations.
Yeah, while we would love to connect to all of our regional hubs, the demand that we saw on our service, even dating back to pre-pandemic, the demand to travel on the 21 to the airports just wasn't there. And so when we're looking at making hard trade-offs and scarcity of resources, that is one of the things that we looked at as reinvesting those resources where they'd be better utilized. That isn't to say, though, that, as Mike had mentioned earlier, we're looking at this unconstrained vision scenario, and that's something that we can incorporate into that part of the plan.
Robert, I'm going to throw this question your way as well. The question is, the 52 line is in the West Berkeley Clean Corridor. We now have zero emission buses on the weekends. When will we get zero emission buses during the week?
The technology needs to get to the level that we can have larger capacity buses, such as the articulated vehicles that we need on the 52 today, to be zero emission. Right now, we don't have that technology available, at least on our property. So we're continuing to use the articulated buses on line 52. For those not familiar with the route, it is a route that connects UC Village to UC campus from Albany to Berkeley, and has very high demand. It's one of our most productive routes during the peaks, and therefore requires a larger fleet type. And so we don't have zero emission articulated buses at this time.
Robert, also, this question is addressing one of the slides, and it asks, what was the shaded area detailed in the slide with DB 239? How would it work?
Yeah, so that's what we're proposing for potential microtransit. And microtransit is demand response service that many smaller transit operators operate, where people can make scheduled trips via an app, and then travel from one location within that zone to another location in that zone. So we're definitely exploring the possibility of that, and working with our union partners to see if we can get a service that's different from fixed route to operate in that zone. Those discussions are still ongoing. So right now we're proposing as an interim solution to just have the 239 cover that area. But if we can get to some sort of solution that we can operate microtransit, we'll do that in that zone.
Thank you, Robert. Michael Eshelman, the question is, some in the community on the 52 line would like the convenience of the 52 going up Cedar to Oxford and suggested alternation of times. Might this ever be realized? If not, why? Any data to show this might be a viable change? We know this was part of the original Realign in January.
Yeah, absolutely. This is something we looked at really deeply. And one of the key things that we kind of settled on was that taking the 52 away from North Berkeley BART, especially as there's proposed new development there, was really a tough sell. I think there's an opportunity for ridership growth further up Cedar and for improving access for folks along that line. But we, in keeping with what we were talking about earlier, with providing regional mobility access for folks passing by that North Berkeley BART station and supporting future development there was really a key goal that we wanted to achieve.
Mike, I'm going to stick with you also, and this question is from Alameda's Mayor, Izzy Ashcraft. Thank you for attending. The question is, I believe a recent slide showed both line OX will not be continued and lines OX and W will be consolidated. If I read this slide correctly, can you please explain the seeming contradiction?
Yes. So yeah, the OX will be replaced by an extension of line W. So the line OX there will not be a line OX, or there is not a line OX in the draft plan, but line W will serve Bay Farm Island. And then we already have existing line O, which runs 7 days a week, that serves portions of the current line OX as well. So it's a trade-off that we're working with in order to free up resources for reliability and frequency.
Thank you. Robert Del Rosario, the question is, why can't the alignment for lines 65 and 67 increase frequency at high demand times for students going to Berkeley High 7 to 9 a.m. and reduce at lower demand times instead of just reducing frequency all the time?
Yeah, because of the way that we schedule service, the majority of our cost is based in the peak hour. And so if we have peak hour frequency that's higher than midday frequency, we don't really get any savings out of that. And so running the bus out there consistently throughout the day provides us a more even schedule and a more even work assignment for our bus operators. So what we instead do is with Berkeley High, we just time the service, and so we make sure that there's a specific bus trip that can get to Berkeley High and give the students enough time to get to school.
Robert, we're going to continue with your expertise for the next question. The question is, please explain why there is a need to use the accordion bus. We still have not heard why it is needed because the peaks are very small. The peaks are about 3 to 4 hours a day, but the bus all the other times only have a few people on the accordion bus. Can you explain this?
Yeah, it's actually very similar to the response I provide on the 65, 67 about providing consistent service through the day. We don't have the resources or the time to bring an accordion bus, or what we call an articulated bus, into the yard and then switch it out and then bring a smaller vehicle back out. We'd probably miss a whole chunk of service in doing that. And so when we pull out the accordion bus, it is to address the peak, and then it'll be out there for most of the day.
I think it is important to address here. Some participating in the meeting may not have a true understanding of what peak means. Can you offer a simple explanation?
Yeah, great point. So peak is when we have peak demand on our service, or peak ridership. So that's typically on a weekday between 6 a.m. and 9 a.m. or maybe even 10 a.m. And then in the PM, that's roughly around 3 p.m. when schools get out, and goes usually until about 7 p.m. In the evening when the work commute is over. So that's our 2 peak period times.
Let's pivot back to Michael Eshelman. The question is, with the reduction in frequency on line 73, is it possible for it to wait at International for transfers from the Tempo Line 1T if one is within 2 to 3 minutes of arrival at the 73rd Avenue station?
We'd have to look at that. It's a little bit difficult to time a hold depending on the street conditions. But one thing that will happen a little bit better with the 73 and the 1T is we can actually look at the schedules, and if there's a specific movement that we think should be prioritized, for instance, going from the 1T to the 73 up to Eastmont, or going from the 1T to the 73 down to Coliseum and the airport, then what we can do is make sure that the 73 hasn't already left International by the time that the 1T shows up. So what we can do is do it with scheduling instead of holding. And with the 73 at 20 minutes and the 1T at 10, that means every other chip on the 1T is going to have a nice connection with the 73.
Thanks, Mike. Robert, this question is best for your experience. Will you be working with cities to absorb transit systems like San Leandro Links and Union City Transit into AC Transit? This would reduce complexity for the public.
While there's a lot of regional interest in coordination amongst transit operators, and that concept that was mentioned in this question, AC Transit is not actively pursuing any type of merging of transit agencies at this time.
Thanks, Robert. Michael Eshelman. The question is, why was the 19 on Buena Vista chosen rather than a route more central to Alamedans, like a bus going through the Santa Clara corridor?
Yeah, so the key thing here is that the bus going on the Santa Clara corridor, we determined would work a little bit better if it went up Telegraph. What we originally had actually proposed is that in the fall was that the 51 would go all the way from Berkeley through Alameda and then to Fruitvale BART. So it'd be the combined 51A and B. And what we heard is that's going to be impossible to keep on time. It's not going to be reliable. It doesn't intersect with our reliability goal. And so what we determined is that this kind of solution with the 6 going through the bridge, or going through the tunnel and then over the bridge to Fruitvale, could handle a little bit better because it's not going along College Avenue, which is another major reliability point. One of the reasons we did choose Santa Clara or Buena Vista over maybe Shoreline is that Buena Vista is a lot closer to Santa Clara than Shoreline is. So we have service on Buena Vista, Santa Clara, and Shoreline, more or less. That's kind of like how we set up the grid there, and Buena Vista was closer to Santa Clara.
Robert, this question is a bit broader. The question is, routes 1T, 51, and 72 seem to be under-provisioned with service compared to their high present-day ridership. Will cutting service on the highest ridership routes decrease ridership, impacting AC Transit's ability to win its current tax revenue in the future?
Sorry, I was on mute. We're not scheduled to or proposing to reduce service on these routes. We want to improve reliability to increase ridership, and so we completely recognize that in order to have our strong ridership base, that we have to maintain our trunk route service. And so these routes, when we look at our service, we're basically scheduling these to maintain their frequency.
Robert, and perhaps you might be able to answer this question. The question is, in the draft plan, line 212 is expected to take over current 217 service between Warm Springs BART and Milpitas BART. However, 212 is stated to have reduced service hours until only 8 p.m. compared to the current 217 service, which runs until 10 p.m. Why is there... Just lost the question. Why is there a major service hour reduction on the backbone of Warm Springs Boulevard corridor through South Fremont and North Milpitas?
Michael Eshelman, I may have to defer that one to you in that detail. Is that okay?
That's fine. That's actually that's a good thing to point out. We'll have a look at it and see if it warrants running a little bit later in the day.
Perfect. Let's get back to this. Chris Andrzejczyk, this question would be best for your expertise. Can you help us better understand what are some of the things that are taking place to address the fiscal cliff?
Sure. Thanks for sending something over my way. So just for, I guess, a little background, the fiscal cliff is something that we've been talking about in transit and maybe some other industries where during the pandemic, we got a good amount of help from the federal government, but that was only temporary. And so when that funding runs out, which for AC Transit will be in this coming year and a half or so, we are going to have a bit of a deficit problem because we'll lack that, that supplemental federal funding. Our general manager showed a chart in the beginning of the presentation that showed some little red slices up at the top, and those were the deficits that we are projecting at this point. So there is no sort of magic solution to that for us. We are doing many things to try and prepare ourselves for that. The first thing is looking for more funding in wherever we can. Staff is working to help shape possible regional ballot measures to generate more funding. We are talking to our funding partners at the county and region and state level, and even the federal government, to see if they can help us out. At least for a little bit longer until we can kind of make our expenses and revenues match. And then internally, we're doing everything we can to basically save what money we can, reduce our expenses. Whenever we go out for contracts, we're making sure that we get the best value and best prices we can. We have an internal working group that is, putting together ideas on, what we can do to sort of save money. We do our budgeting yearly, and we are about finished with the budget process for this coming year. And internally, when we do our budgets, we don't assume that, what people or what a department say spent last year is what they're going to get for the following year. Every year we do a budget, every department has to request and justify all the funding they need for whatever contracts or supplies or things that they need to run the business that year. So we don't coast on neutral or just let things slide. We are definitely looking at every expense that's requested and making sure that everything is necessary. So we're trying to do our part to make sure that we can hold down our expenses and stretch our revenues as long as we can.
Thanks, Chris. Let's pivot back to Mike Eshelman. The question is, I appreciate your work, but it does seem that some of the lines, i.e. the number 7, are somewhat orphaned to other lines that are getting more, not less frequency. I will encourage people to communicate their concerns to you. It's more of a statement, I guess.
Well, I guess I should address it pretty clearly. So the plan that we brought to the board in January really focused on kind of trying to keep as much of the existing coverage and keep the lower ridership lines with as much frequency as possible at the expense of some of the higher ridership lines that carried the most people. And so what we heard was, hey, you're cutting lines to our you're cutting service on lines to our equity priority communities. You're cutting service on our highest ridership lines in favor of keeping service in these other places. And so we were told pretty explicitly to go back and prioritize equity in the decisions that we were making. So the plan that we have today makes a conscious choice to reduce service in places where we have fewer riders and that are not equity priority communities, and increase service in places with more riders that are equity priority communities.
Robert Del Rosario, the question is, incredibly long, freakishly shaped routes like the new 6, 18, and 88 will be terrible for reliability. Why isn't AC Transit pursuing bus lanes, signal priority, and other improvements to rectify this?
We actually are actively pursuing transit priority elements, those that are just mentioned. We do a lot of signal improvement work on Telegraph. There's a signal project that we're doing to try to improve the flow of buses. We're also coordinating with the local jurisdictions on many of these corridors to try to get transit priority. One thing to keep in mind is that AC Transit, we don't own the right of way. So we're often partnering with our local jurisdiction cities to see if we can get transit priority. And then the local jurisdictions, of course, have to balance it with other needs they have, whether it's pedestrian improvements, safety improvements, bike infrastructure improvements. So it's an iterative process and an ongoing process with cities, but we are actively pursuing transit priority on our major corridors, which is where our buses are slowed down the most by traffic.
Thanks, Robert. Mike Eshelman, the question is about line 21. It asks, rather than completely eliminating 21 bus service to the airport, have you explored reducing frequency of the line or adding an additional fee for airport service as BART does for its service to the airport?
So we have an adopted set of fares. So we either have a local fare or we have a Transbay fare in terms of the two kind of settings of fares. And so we have not explored making the airport service a Transbay fare. That would be separate from decisions about where our service goes and how often it's operating. We periodically look at having every other trip do something or having separate patterns on a line. It can create some customer confusion and frustration. It's something to look at. One of the key things to note is that that airport service carries only a handful of folks a day at the airport. And so saving the resources, the operators, the buses, and putting them onto another line that carries more people is a significant contribution to our revenue, our ridership, and our environmental goals.
Thanks, Mike. Diane, I have some outreach questions for you. In fact, two. The first is, will there be a public comment period for this meeting, or will all feedback in this meeting be taken through this Q&A chat feature?
Okay, so we have a public comment period that runs through June 5th, and the feedback that's coming in through the Q&A is being recorded, and so we are taking all of your comments that way. So there is not a special public comment period, if you will. It's through the Q&A feedback.
Next question outreach would be, could there be announcements on the buses promoting these meetings about potential changes? San Francisco Muni uses this on their buses.
Yes, actually we have promotions on and inside our buses. We have take one cards or flyers inside the buses that let people know about the different meetings and ways to review the draft plan, as well as to make their comment or feedback on their lines. Also, we have some advertising outside the buses that are moving through our service area.
Thanks, Diane. Claudia Burgos, this question is for you. I keep seeing posts, articles, and hearing podcasts, that talk about the state of California combining all of the transit agencies in Northern California. When will this happen, and how will this affect AC Transit?
Thanks, Robert, for the question. There certainly has been a lot of coverage about this topic, probably in the last 2 years or so. There is no definitive plan at this time, although there is a Senate bill that's making its way through the process in Sacramento. Tomorrow, actually, we will know the fate of that bill, Senate Bill 1031, which in addition to including a proposal for, this is the ballot measure that we may see on the ballot in 2026 to support funding for transit in the Bay Area. There's also an entire section of that bill that speaks to consolidation and enhanced coordination. So that portion of the bill calls for a study to be completed and recommendations to be made. So it's still very early on, although there is a lot of focus and attention on this topic, and we're monitoring it closely. We're very engaged. We were just in Sacramento earlier this week speaking to members of our delegation about this topic. And tomorrow will be the last day for this bill to make it out of the Senate and move on over to the Assembly. So we'll keep an eye on it.
Thanks, Claudia. This question remains with our outreach team, and it's directed to Diane. The question is, public outreach about Realign so far has been unspecific and positive about the changes planned. Now that AC Transit has this draft plan, will new public postings be made about the specific changes proposed on individual routes and stops? Frequency on this route will increase, decrease is a quote. A second quote is, or this bus will go someplace different. I guess making suggestions, or this bus will stop running is a much clearer way to inform and engage riders. Do you need me to repeat that?
Yeah.
So effectively, the question is, public outreach about Realign so far has been unspecific and positive about the changes planned. Now that AC Transit has this draft plan, will new public postings be made about the specific changes posed on individual routes and stops?
Okay, now I understand the question. Wasn't sure for a moment. So actually, online as well as at some of our local libraries, we have in the draft plan, we have route profiles where that talks specifically to all the changes that are happening to each line. And so we do have that information. You will not see any new information until after we close this period, which is after June 5th, and when we get ready to go into the next public comment period, which will start in August. So I hope that answers the question.
It does. Thanks, Diane. Michael Eshelman. This question asks, if the 376 is removed, will there be no night service around San Pablo, or would it just be part of the 76 line?
So the 76 will actually be proposed to operate till midnight to cover where the majority of the ridership on the 376 was occurring. So that's one of the things that we're doing as part of this plan.
Thanks, Mike. This question is for Lawrence with Kittleson. The question is, I heard that other cities like Los Angeles have changed their bus routes similar to AC Transit. How often does your consulting firm redesign transit agency routes? Why are lots of agencies making these changes?
Good question. And first, I just like to acknowledge the team with Kittleson. So we have TMD, Circle Point, and Winter as sub-consultants. And in terms of how often this happens, it's definitely been more frequently since and during the pandemic for a lot of the same reasons that we're hearing about from AC Transit. So just understanding that travel patterns have changed and that there are financial constraints that lots of transit agencies are facing. And so a lot of the same kinds of tough questions are coming up across the country in terms of how to redesign service to make it more efficient while still maintaining the same values and core principles, that the agencies have.
Thank you for that. Let's go back to Chris. The question is, if AC Transit needs more money to keep the routes, why don't you increase some of the bus fares?
So this is a question we have brought to our board several times, and the consensus is really that we don't want to disadvantage the riders that we have. We know we have a relatively transit dependent and significant amount of car-free riders who really need our service, and we don't feel that the financial issues that we have should be borne on the backs of our riders. Certainly, fares can go up, like other prices go up. But we don't think this is a problem that necessarily should be solved just by our riders. At least that's not where we initially would like to go. We would like to, try to find external funding sources so we don't, disadvantage our riders.
Thanks, Chris. Diane, this is a accessibility question for outreach. The question is, I am blind. You make me feel like I don't matter. I can't read the flyers or cards. So what you are saying is the only way I will hear of these meetings is word of mouth?
Yeah, that's a good question. We have been meeting, AC Transit has what's called a General Manager's Access Committee. And so that committee consists of individuals who were recommended by our board of directors for their wards. And they represent individuals with varying disabilities as well as the senior community. And we've been meeting with them on a monthly basis to provide updates on Realign. So that is one way. And they've also been giving us some input on ways that we can do a better job of communicating with those with low or no vision. Also, we have been working with a number of community partners, including the Center for Resources and Independent Living. And we just recently actually met with this group to introduce the draft plan and also ask them to help us to share this with the communities who have low and no vision. We can always do a better job, but we understand from the folks that we've been kind of meeting with is that we are providing this information. They do have screen scanners to pull some of this information, but if you have any additional ideas for ways that we can do better in this area, please feel free to let us know. But we are trying to do our best to reach out to different folks. We've asked them to serve as our ambassadors to help reach the communities with accessibility challenges.
Thanks, Diane. Robert, this question is for you. How do AC Transit's route run times account for changes in operating speeds throughout the day, such as running slower during rush hour? Are more buses put into service at rush hour to maintain the same frequency? Are peak frequencies effectively lower, or are operators expected to make up for slower travel by shortening their breaks?
Great question. Now you're talking in my wheelhouse. So yes, that's exactly what we do. So there is definitely more congestion during the peaks, and we defined the peaks earlier. And so in those times, we need to have a schedule that's more realistic to the operating conditions. And that's exactly what we do is we throw in additional buses during the peaks. There are certain routes where it's a flat schedule all day long because we don't have that peaking or congestion problem during the peaks, but most of our trunk routes do. And so we do add additional vehicles that give the operators additional running time. So if you start looking at our timetables and our schedules closely, you'll start seeing that the times actually change over the course of the day. And then we keep those extra buses out there for like an 8-hour period or even for the whole day. And so what happens in the off peaks is that the bus operators will get a little bit more break time. But yes, we do accommodate for changing traffic conditions by adding more buses into the schedule.
Thanks, Robert. Chris, this question is for you. Will there be any changes to the Clipper card with these bus route changes?
So not specifically linked to the bus route changes. The Clipper card is a regional system that AC Transit utilizes, is sort of a member of or participates in. But it is a regional thing run by a regional entity. That said, they are working on basically an upgrade to the Clipper system. We sort of internally call it Clipper 2. It is an improvement that allows for much better functionality and should allow for what they call open payments, where you can pay directly with a credit or debit card instead of having to use a Clipper card. The timeline for that is changing a little bit. And so I can't tell you exactly when that is going to come into fore, but it's somewhere around the timeline of when some of the changes for Realign might come into place. So that will also be something that we advertise for Clipper on our buses, and it will be advertised regionally. So certainly when the next generation Clipper system is coming out, it is something you could at least see on our website, if definitely in other places also.
Thanks, Chris. Mike Eshelman, back to you, please. The question is, if the goal of Realign is to promote more transit service to more communities, then reducing service on the 72R through San Pablo Avenue would be counterproductive to your agency's goal of providing quality service to riders. Would it be possible to at least revise the frequency from every 12 minutes to every 15 minutes so that it can still be seen as a get up and go service similar to the tempo's frequency of every 10 to 30 minutes every day?
I think that's a great question and illustrates kind of an important issue that we're working with this particular plan. So it's cost neutral. So going to 15 minutes would require about 5 or 6 additional buses be put on that line. And I'm not sure where those buses would come from. And it's kind of illustrated by the discussion that we've had today. So we're already what we're seeing is a lot of communities are concerned about maybe service reductions, frequency reductions, or trade-offs that they are experiencing because we're trying to funnel service in different places with higher ridership. So if we were to add the additional service onto the 72R, we'd have to take it from somewhere. And I'm not sure. We've looked at it a lot of different ways, and I'm not sure there's a good way to do it. I do have a silver line. So the key thing here is this draft plan is just resetting the network at our current service levels, but staff is working on a plan for what our priorities would be as hiring improves and retention improves and we grow our operator ranks. And the 72R is near the top of that list of something to improve, along with other lines where we see a lot of crowding, like the 51, the 1T, et cetera. So we're looking at identifying ways to address a lot of the trade-offs that we're seeing in this current plan. And the best way to address those trade-offs is to hire more people.
Thanks, Mike. The next question is for Claudia. The question is, my friend told me about this webinar because she knows I ride the bus. How can I get more information, and how do I tell AC Transit how these changes will affect my ability to get to work on time?
Thanks, Robert, and thanks to your friend, and thank you whoever asked this question for joining the webinar today. So there's a couple of ways. There's, as Diane mentioned a little while ago, the AC Transit website is the place where most information can be found about the proposals, how individual lines are going to change or be modified. We also have information at local libraries. The list of those local libraries is also found on the website. You can send information and feedback via email. You can send information via voicemail, and Robert is going to provide all of those contact information for all of those different channels. We are tracking the comments that we are getting on social media as well. And you can also attend the upcoming June 5th Board of Directors workshop on this topic, where feedback will also be accepted.
Thanks, Claudia. Robert Del Rosario, sort of a two-part question here. It's 2 questions on bus stop improvements. Will Realign bring bus stop improvements, including amenities? Is the first. And the second, are there plans to better protect bus stops from cars? Many cars park at or near bus stops, slowing service and making it harder for people with disabilities to board.
You're on mute, Robert.
You're muted.
I was doing so well too. Great question. So in response to your first one, bus stops in Realign may be moved or adjusted if we have routes that are changing, and then bus stops say need to go from a near side of an intersection to the far side because the bus is turning. We'll update bus stops in that way. But amenities are completely separate effort and capital effort for the district as well as our partner local jurisdictions to try to plan and implement. And then with regards to the second question about parked cars, it's a big challenge and a big problem for our service, and it does slow our service down and makes it less accessible for folks needing to board at bus stops when there's a parked car there. So enforcement is key there, and working with our partner jurisdictions on enforcement, as well as our Alameda County Sheriff's contract who oversee our service is important there. And I will say that we have also had the ability to monitor bus stops via camera. And so we have a pilot program that we're going to start shortly, where we can start issuing citations and warnings to people parked in our bus stops via camera on our bus. So it's pretty exciting technology that we're hoping to roll out soon.
Thanks, Robert. We're going to stick with planning. Mike, the next question is for you. The question is, are you still planning to eliminate service to El Sobrante on line 74?
Yes, that's still a proposal in the plan. The goal is to have faster service between high school and Richmond. And then also shaving off that portion of the line that had low ridership allows us to preserve that 30-minute frequency along the line. As our commute times and run times get longer, it can really make it so that the only way to operate a service is to reduce its frequency to match the actual time it takes to get from point A to point B. And so taking a little bit of the portion of the route off the very end allows us to really preserve that 30-minute service and make sure that we have the right run times and layovers on that route.
Thanks, Mike. Robert, I'm going to go back to you on this question. The question is, will there be more of these pollution-free buses when the bus lines change?
Not necessarily when the bus lines change, but we are mandated to convert our fleet to a zero emission fleet. And so we have a schedule, and I think we have a couple of documents, our clean corridors plan, as well as our fleet conversion plan to get to zero emission. So it's a program that AC Transit takes a lot of pride in. And I think we're one of the leading agencies in the industry with getting zero emission technology onto our property. And so as time goes, we will definitely be increasing our zero emission vehicles, but it requires lots of infrastructure, lots of cost, and those are things that we're constantly working on to try to make sure that we can do this.
Thanks, Robert. Mike, there is a question. The question is, how do you determine what hours each line runs?
That's a great question. It's actually something we're looking at very deeply with this particular project. So we have a current board policy 545 that provides some guidance for staff about how long each line should run based on what communities it's serving, what type of route it is, et cetera. We're actually updating that document as part of this overall Realign project. So it's called our service standards document. And what we're doing is taking a hard look at our current service standards of how often lines should run, the standards for how often lines should run, how late and how early they should run, et cetera, to make improvements. I think the ultimate goal is to run as late as you can afford, as much as possible. What we have found is that reducing every time you eliminate the last trip because of low ridership, the second to last trip becomes the low ridership trip because people don't like to take the exact last trip on a line. Whenever they're riding a bus, they like to have the certainty that there's going to be another trip behind. So that's something we're actively looking on. We'll have more about our service standards coming up later in this overall project timeline.
Thanks, Mike. Robert, throw this question your way, please. Could AC Transit pursue coordination with other transit agencies like Union City Transit to have better frequencies and transfers?
Yes. We're not specifically looking at Union City Transit, but we are looking at other agencies that we can better coordinate our schedules with, including BART and Golden Gate Transit or WestCat. And I think eventually Union City would fall into that category. So there is more coordination that's happening now than ever between transit operators. And part of that is looking at how can our schedules better complement each other? How can you make sure that if there is a transfer, that it's a time transfer so that you're not waiting once you get off one of our buses and try to transfer to another system. And so this requires us adjusting our schedules. We'll probably try to do a little bit of this in our upcoming service changes, potentially also with Realign. But it is something that AC Transit is very interested in and is actively pursuing with other agencies. And I think the ultimate goal is to try to do this with as many transit agencies as possible.
Robert, let's stick with you as well. The question is, how will folks in wheelchairs be impacted by these changes? If frequency is diminished, it will result in higher rider volume on each bus, and potentially no room for passengers in wheelchairs.
So this is a cost neutral plan, and maybe there are proposals where frequency will be reduced, but there are also proposals where frequency will be improved and reliability will be improved. And so in those situations, a more reliable bus and a more evenly spaced bus means it allows us to better manage passenger and ridership loads on our vehicles, and also then therefore having additional space or available space for people to board the bus. So there are definitely trade-offs in this plan, but overall we're trying to get we're trying to get the service to match where demand is the most, and also that means folks who need to use our wheelchair areas or our wheelchair lifts would be better accommodated.
Robert, I'm going to stick with you. This is a question that seems to be a direct response to what our general manager introduced earlier in this presentation. The question is, I can drive. How do I get a job with AC Transit?
Great question. We are definitely interested in whoever asked this question to come and apply for a job at AC Transit. We are constantly pursuing bus operators and mechanics. Please go to www.actransit.org and look under our careers section, and you'll see the application process there. There's also lots of information about the benefits and the pay and signing bonus and the things I mentioned earlier about tuition reimbursement. Yeah, definitely check it out. We're also have a great campaign out there for recruiting operators, so you can find information when you're riding our bus or in other media channels to try to apply for a job here.
I'm going to add, just to piggyback to what Robert is saying, you do not need commercial driving experience in order to apply for a position as a bus operator. We do conduct all training in-house. Our Training and Education Center is one of the top-rated programs in the state. We will provide the full training, including your certification, here in-house. So if you are interested, once again, it's actransit.org/careers. The next question is for Mike. The question is, are there plans to time bus departures better with BART arrivals?
That is something that, yeah, absolutely. One of the key things we're trying to do is run the service so frequently that you don't need to worry as much about the BART departures and arrivals. But a key thing, and maybe a good example, is Central County, is that running service that coordinates well with BART, particularly Hayward, San Leandro, Castro Valley, and South Hayward BARTs, is really crucial, and Bayfair is really crucial for folks that ride the bus in those communities. And so that's a key component of what we're working on in that particular part of the community.
I'm going to stick with you, Mike. This question is it still possible for there to be changes to the plan?
Absolutely. So this is, I mean, we're not doing engagement just to do engagement. We're hearing a lot of really good feedback. We're hearing from a lot of different communities about whether they like things, whether they don't like things, suggestions for changes. It's always makes me feel really good to see people thinking actively about what could work better for the proposals that we're putting out there, and what could work better for the communities they live in and how their commutes work. So this is an engagement process that runs I think till June 5th. And then we're going to go back to the drawing board, look at everything, consider everything that we've heard, and make adjustments to the plan. So this is, yes, we will be making changes to the plan as a result of what we're hearing through this process.
Mike, thank you. And speaking of thank you for all of your questions and your participation in tonight's Realign Community Workshop. This now concludes this evening's meeting. As we close, please remember to provide your feedback by June 5th, when the public comment period concludes for this phase of the project. Maria, can you please bring the last slide back to display contact information one last time? There are multiple ways that you can share your comments. As you see on screen, you can scan the QR code. You may also visit our project webpage at actransit.org/realign. That is REALIGN. You can also call us. We have project lines available in English, Spanish, Mandarin Chinese, and Cantonese Chinese. Visit one of the 21 participating libraries that are hosting our route profile books with line-by-line proposals and online and printed comment cards to help you submit your comments. Please help us get the word out so your voices can be heard as we work to update our entire bus network. You are welcome to join online or in person on June 5th at a special AC Transit Board meeting and Realign workshop, which begins at 5 p.m. If you have additional questions or comments, do not hesitate to reach out by emailing us or calling our community project line. You can contact us by email or phone. The email is realign@actransit.org. Project phone line is 510-267-5631. That is the English line. The Spanish line is 510-267-5632. And for Mandarin, 510-267-5633. And finally, for Cantonese, the number is 510-267-5634. This concludes this evening's meeting, and once again, we thank you all for joining. For those of you online, you will be asked to take a brief survey. It's just 5 questions and very quick before you leave the meeting. Thank you again for your participation in this evening's workshop. We wish you good night.